Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 mod roundup. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'll be highlighting 10 more awesome mods that I've been enjoying using recently that I haven't previously showcased on the channel. Some of them are new, some are a little older, but all of them are fun, interesting, and very much worth checking out. As always, all of these mods are going to be available cross-platform on console, Mac, and PC, and have been tested with the latest patch, so both by me and by others, so no matter where you play, you should be able to use them. I've also included a wide variety of new content, rebalances, quality of life updates, and cosmetic mods, so no matter how you want to customize your game, there should be something here to help you do exactly that. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Monkey What Chicken Butt for the $20 donation, Tony for the £5, Tarantula for the $5, and Grey Guru, Big Mikey, and Josh Serto for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means so much to me. Alright, let's talk mods. Let's start with the Ancient Megapack and REL Random Loot mod. This Loot Randomizer mod adds more than 2,000 new items to the game, and randomizes their locations, so different places so the same place will have different loot in each playthrough. Not only is this an enormous amount of additional content that enables new builds, new discovery of different items and everything, the random loot in sort of roguelike progression gives you a much different approach to playing the game and kind of solves some of the issues that especially more veteran players of Baldur's Gate can really run into. Baldur's Gate has items that really heavily incentivize you to build characters in some ways and heavily disincentivize you from building characters in other ways because some builds and some strategies have really strong item support and some don't. Adding a ton of new items to the game not only add support for a lot of builds that otherwise couldn't exist, but encourages you to, rather than planning your build from the very beginning of the game, knowing what items are going to appear and what's going to be available to you, to reactively create your characters based in part on what you find. Find a cool item that cares about doing poison damage early, and suddenly maybe you're going to build a poison-themed character. Something that Baldur's Gate kind of tricks you into doing, because it gives you a lot of cool poisoned items, poison-themed items in Act 1, and then in Act 2 and 3, everything is immune to poison, and the poison-themed items stop appearing. But when your loot is randomized, and you have a little bit more of an ability to react to what you are going to find in that playthrough, it enables builds that you otherwise wouldn't consider if you were playing vanilla Baldur's Gate, where you knew that there wouldn't be item support for it. I find that this not only adds just a ton of replayability to the game, but also makes me consider building characters that I simply wasn't building before, and for me that's really, really fun. I also really appreciate their YouTube thumbnail style screenshots here, but basically there are tons and tons of different items here, and they enable so many cool different strategies and different ways of approaching the game that also give you, as this screenshot says here, give you new ways to take on old fights that you might not have been considering previously. Some of the strategies that you get from these items let you approach fights in completely new ways that weren't available in vanilla Baldur's Gate. So coming up with new strategies on the fly based on the items you have, coming up with new build combinations is just super fun when you're playing with this mod. Having randomized loot also adds so much replayability to the game and adds the fun back to looting. Having no idea what might be in a chest that you open is really exciting, so it feels like playing the game for the first time every time. Once you've played through Baldur's Gate once or twice or many, many, many times, you of course know exactly what loot is in what location, so you lose some of the excitement of opening those boxes. And maybe you skip a lot of locations in your playthroughs because you know that there's no reason to go there. With random loot, suddenly those locations, which are often really fun and cool and neat set pieces, and often fun fights, have a reason to go to them, and so you can go there just to find, because maybe the perfect item is in a box at that place. As the mod says, it adds tons of build diversity and the thrill of exploration and the thrill of exploring your build as you build the character based on what items you're finding. I will say that I've run into some balance issues and a couple items with bugs. 2,000 is obviously a lot of items to keep track of, and so some of them are going to be a little bit too strong or not that powerful, which is also part of the fun of a roguelike, is finding a really, really strong item, and you can always decide not to use it if you don't want that strength in your playthrough. And overall, I've actually found that the balance is typically pretty good. A lot of these are 5th edition items that exist in Dungeons & Dragons tabletop, and so are intended for playthrough in the game. There are removed early access items that are back in the game, things like that. So there's a lot of items that were intended, and a lot of the ones that the developer has made themselves are reasonably well balanced, with a couple exceptions. Overall, I think that this build is this mod is just so much fun for replaying the game as a more veteran player. I definitely don't recommend it for your first playthrough because the loot is curated to give the experience that the developers wanted the first time, but once you played through the game once, getting an entirely new loot system is just a huge change to how exciting it is to go to certain locations. Highly recommend this mod. Next up, Camp Event Overhaul. This is a quality of life and story mod that takes the camp events that happen in Act 1 and makes them more likely to occur and more likely to occur in sensible times in the storyline. There are tons and tons and tons of camp events that can happen in Act 1. You go back to the camp and a cutscene plays, or you have a given conversation with a character. And a lot of the time they have extremely narrow and restrictive conditions for actually triggering that make them very unlikely to happen in a run. Without using this mod, I've played Act 1 literally hundreds of times, and there are events that this mod rebalances that I've seen only a handful of times because it's so easy to stop them from triggering. For example, if you don't camp right away after getting off the Nautiloid, there's an event that you just completely miss. And there are many like that this mod makes more likely to happen so that you don't miss those storylines. I think that this is really nice because it means that camping in Act 1 becomes much more fun. There are fewer nights where just nothing happens at all. And also, you're just more likely to see those events that otherwise you would miss. And some of them are really important storylines and really cute things. Really good ways to get to know the companions and stuff like that you otherwise simply don't get access to. This is especially nice for origin character runs because many of them are supposed to have events that give you more context for the storyline. So if you're playing as one of the companions as an origin character, a lot of them are supposed to have early camp events that give you a little more context for what they're doing and give you a little more backstory on that character that often just don't trigger at all, given the vanilla requirements for triggering them. So for origin character runs, you may well be missing an important scene or story event if you are playing without this mod. So I really like it because it just makes these scenes that I think are both well done and important and kind of a shame to miss more likely to trigger, and they'll trigger at much more natural times in the storyline. Next up, Rolan spells. So you may not know this, but the NPC Rolan, the tiefling that you meet in the Grove, has 5 unique spells that are not available to any other character in the game. These include a version of Mage Armor, Thunder Wave, Color Spray, Magic Missile, and Fireball, all of which differ significantly from the base versions of those spells. For example, Rolan's Mage Armor is just a +2 AC buff for the entire day that takes no concentration and stacks with normal Mage Armor, so it's like Shield of Faith without the concentration. A very, very powerful spell. Normally, these are not available to players, but with this mod, you get access to these spells, and you can see which characters get access to them in this list here. I think that this is really fun, both because it's just cool that you get to use new spells that don't exist for players normally, but also it makes a very flavorful reward for saving Rolan and then rewarding him in Act 3. I like to start using these spells in Act 3 once he becomes the head of the tower, because that seems like an appropriate time to use these admittedly very powerful spells. His mage armor in particular is really, really good, and an appropriate reward for giving him, such a big step up in life. So Rolan spells, I think, is just a really fun way to get access to a bunch of unique spells. They also, as you can see, they do look pretty cool. They've got unique graphics and animations and everything, and the ability to cast them on your own characters, and you can roleplay that as having learned them from Rolan himself, makes perfect sense to me, especially for a wizard. One of the fun things about being a wizard is collecting unique versions of spells that wouldn't exist otherwise, learning them from various people in various locations, and this is one way to do that. Next up, Baldur's Gate 3 Chocolate Edition. This is described as a delicious chocolate coating to the delicious vanilla experience of Baldur's Gate 3, and is a complete balance and content overhaul for pretty much the entire game. It has new and rebalanced feats, new and rebalanced spells, new and rebalanced class abilities, a complete overhaul to many of the basic systems, like a completely different initiative system, origin classes for each of the companions so that they get their own unique abilities that differentiate them further from just the normal class abilities, and many, many more things. In fact, this mod comes with a 60-page PDF document that outlines all the changes, or a 2-hour-long video by Creative Excuses Gaming, longtime commenter on my channel and a great video creator in his own right, and of course the author of this mod. I really like the extremely expansive and comprehensive nature of these balance changes. I don't agree with all of them, but that would be pretty much impossible given how many there are. And on the whole, I think that this takes the game in a really good direction of making almost every ability relevant, making many more abilities much more fun and interesting to use, and in particular emphasizing the spells working with the extra mechanics that exist in Baldur's Gate 3. It looks like the screenshots are a little bit broken here, unfortunately, but you can see, for example, that some of the things will work with radiating orbs, which is something that Baldur's Gate 3 added on a couple items, a mechanic that exists in the game, but doesn't really interact with the rest of the game. And the vanilla Baldur's Gate, can have the issue that it feels like they took 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and then tacked on a bunch of separate systems. Wet, in particular, is a mechanic that really suffers from this, where it's not really part of the game and it ends up being super broken because the game wasn't balanced around enemies taking double damage. And so something that Chocolate Edition has really tried to do is integrate the additional mechanics that Larian added with the tabletop mechanics that Baldur's Gate 3 is built on, and I think it's been very successful in making the game feel more cohesive as a result. Also, like any good collection of balance changes, this one is being constantly updated and improved. I have seen many, many updates to this mod while I've been using it, and that's great. I love seeing that it's being fine-tuned and tweaked. I think that the mod author has been incredibly on top of making changes and everything. You can see lots of very recent updates as well, and that really helps it feel like it's evolving towards an even more comprehensive and improved version of the game. If you are looking for a rebalance that especially helps you use abilities that you previously just ignored, obviously 5th edition and Baldur's Gate as a result of that has a lot of abilities, especially feats that were an afterthought during the development of the tabletop game, that simply aren't useful, and that you will end up just ignoring in 99% of every build, or if you're a new player, accidentally getting trapped into taking and making your character worse. So a balance mod that aims to bring those abilities to being more useful is exactly the type of thing that makes the game just much more fun and interesting, and gives you a lot more meaningful decisions in character creation, which is, I think, amazing. Next up, Critical Mockery. This might be one of my favorite mods ever. It's very simple. What it does is it plays the Vicious Mockery voice lines when your character critical hits or when enemies critically miss. The Vicious Mockery voice lines are amazing. There are so many of them. Every character has them. They've been voice acted for every character, even though none of the origin characters are bards. And that one of the great things about Baldur's Gate is that they've added all these touches in so characters have rage screams, even if they're not barbarians, and the really funny and customized Vicious Mockery dialogues that you often won't see because not every companion is going to be playing a bard. Having your characters taunt the enemies when they crit them is just funny and very satisfying, and these lines are so well done as well that getting to hear them more often and have them show up more frequently is great. I recommend not using this mod on a build that is intended to critically hit all the time, because then you will get sick of hearing this dialogue constantly. But on any build where a critical hit, on a party without a critical hit focused character, where you're going to get these voice lines occasionally and in scenarios where you really want to taunt the enemies, it just feels so good and it's going to make you laugh every time. I've really loved using this mod. The Ghost class. So this is a new custom class mod, a homebrew class, and it's got such an interesting concept and way of execution that I really wanted to highlight it. This lets you play as a ghost, but the abilities that make up the class abilities for this class are taken from all of the various ghosts that exist in Baldur's Gate 3. There's a lot of ghosts in this game, and many of them have unique and pretty interesting abilities to fight against, so this class asks, what would it look like to have those as a player? The Ghost class also comes with a lot of visual updates, so you can look ghostly as you drift around, but mostly it gives you passive abilities and active abilities that are taken from the various ghosts that exist throughout the game and are really fun to use. Lots of fear and darkness-based abilities, a lot of reducing enemy stats and dealing necrotic damage, and all of those are things that Dungeons & Dragons tends not to give to the player. Fear-based abilities in particular are very popular and very powerful, but Baldur's Gate hasn't put, for example, Conquest Paladin, one of the easiest ways to get those in tabletop, in the game. So there's not actually a lot of ways to frighten enemies in Baldur's Gate, and that's such a fun and flavorful way to play the game that a character that's built around that is a really fun addition. I really like this class in particular just for the concept. Getting to be a more powerful and growing version of one of the specters that haunts Baldur's Gate 3 is, I think, just really fun. And I like that the abilities are all taken from abilities in-game, so you can use them and recognize where they're from, or enemies can use them against you and you can go, hey, wait, that's what I do. This class comes with 4 subclasses, ranging from more on the controlling side with the Tortured Soul, to more on the tanking side with the Cultist, more of a blaster with the Primordial, and of course the Revenant Beastmaster is a summoner. I will say that the class is definitely on the strong side, balance-wise. I haven't found it to be egregiously out of step with other things that are available in Baldur's Gate, but it does give you some high-level spells earlier than you would normally have access to, and some abilities that are AoE because they are enemy abilities that would probably be single target if they were designed from the ground up as being a player ability. But I don't think that it is so wildly out of scale that it needs a significant nerf, and especially if you play with difficulty mods, this will fit just fine into a party and be both fun and reasonably well balanced to play with. And the concept is just so cool, and getting to use these enemy abilities as well as the ways that they work in-game and the tactical options that they open up, I think is just so much fun. And because it's a class mod, of course, you can build your character to be more flavorful and less powerful, or to just purely optimize since you have control over how you build your character. Next up, a pair of cosmetic mods, Feline Fiendish and Feline Fiendish Tieflings 2. This mod replaces the normal Cambion eyes with feline or cat-like eyes with vertical pupils, which I think is really fun for giving them a more hellish and inhuman look. In particular, the version that adds it to all Tieflings in the game is really nice for playing with Tiefling player characters, and also for the Tiefling companions in the game, to look just a little bit more weird and otherworldly, which I think is just a fun way for them to look, and gives you a little bit more contrast as well in the Grove. All of the Tieflings with the cat eyes staring at you at once, as in this picture, is a little bit unsettling, and that's kind of fun. I think this visual looks really good with a lot of the Tiefling NPCs in the game, and just gives like a different aspect to how they look. I will say it looks a little silly to me with Karlach, but for Tiefling player characters, I think it looks great when you get to adjust the colors of the eyes. And if you use other cosmetic mods with Karlach, then that can avoid the slightly goofy appearance, or you might just like the way that this looks yourself. Obviously, my cosmetic preferences may not be yours. But this mod just gives you a much more hellish look for Tieflings in the game, which I just think is really fun. Enemies Reworked. This is a difficulty mod that makes combat in the game significantly harder, but does it in my favorite way for a difficulty mod to work, by adding more tactical options for enemies, by giving them new abilities, by adding more stuff that you have to consider, where enemies have more additional passives that you have to pay attention to, rather than just giving them raw stat upgrades. It's also fully compatible with other difficulty mods like Tactician Enhanced that give raw stat upgrades, so if you want to use Enemies Reworked and add extra health or damage to enemies as well, then that's something that you can do. But what I really like about this difficulty mod is that it makes enemies have more sensible abilities, more powerful abilities, and ones that you have to, as the player, actually pay attention to, more than just increasing their sheer numbers and forcing you to build like cheesier builds in order to win, rather than play better and more tactically. The overall effect of this mod is mostly much more difficult fights, because enemies will have a lot more options, and the AI in Baldur's Gate is actually pretty good at using its, when it has a lot of options, at picking one that's going to actually do something bad to you. So a lot of time, fights that would be pretty predictable because those enemies can only ever do one thing, they will tend to do stuff that is more powerful and more dangerous than they used to, and it will often be something that's very inconvenient for you, so it really makes you think on your feet quite a bit more when enemies simply have more things that they can do. As they say here, it adds harder fights with more unpredictable outcomes, because it's just harder to predict the outcome of a fight where you don't know what the enemy is going to do, but it's also harder to predict how the fight is going to go turn to turn when you don't know what enemies are going to do, and that yields some of the most fun scenarios in Baldur's Gate 3 when something has gone wrong and you have to fix it, rather than rolling into a combat, executing your plan perfectly, and then moving on with your day, never having had to make a real decision since nothing happened to change your initial plan. Another thing that I really like about this mod is that it is themed and flavorful across the different factions. Different factions get unique buffs, which makes them actually feel different to fight against. One issue that you can run into in vanilla Baldur's Gate 3 is that a lot of times a similar type of enemy feels identical to fight against regardless of what they are. A Flaming Fist archer versus a Moonrise Towers cultist archer versus a Kuo-toa archer all feel pretty similar, because you know exactly what they're going to be doing turn to turn, and there's not really much you have to pay attention to for those characters that differentiates them. So adding a unique buff to each of those types of factions so that they feel more different to fight against and make you approach those fights in different ways, I think is both flavorful and really fun. Anything that just gets you thinking more about what you're doing in combat, I think is a great thing for a difficulty mod to do, and this one does just that. Next up, a tabletop subclass mod, the Book of Sorcerers. This adds 4 tabletop 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons subclasses to Baldur's Gate 3, the Aberrant Mind, Clockwork Soul, Divine Soul, and Lunar Sorcery sorcerer subclasses. I always love mods that add tabletop classes and subclasses to the game. Obviously, the tabletop classes and everything are designed for Dungeons and Dragons, and so it's very easy for them to fit seamlessly and be flavorful and well-balanced and everything for Baldur's Gate 3. And the Sorcerer subclasses in particular, I think, fill a really useful niche for Baldur's Gate, because in Baldur's Gate 3, you can build a Shadow Sorcerer specifically, and that's a really interesting thing to build. And if you're doing, like, Scorching Ray stuff, you can use Draconic Sorcerer, and obviously Wild Magic Sorcerer is fun. But, like, 80% of the time, whenever you take a Sorcerer level, it's correct to just play a Storm Sorcerer, because its ability, especially at level 1, is so much more generically powerful than other classes. So it can feel a little, than the other Sorcerer subclasses. So it can feel a little bit constraining, not having more Sorcerer options, and giving yourself a good reason to take other versions of Sorcerers is, I think, just really good, and opens up a lot more room for build diversity in Sorcerers. Aberrant Mind Sorcerers focus on psionics, which is, of course, very present in the storyline of BG3, and also have an insane spell list, including Dissonant Whispers and Hunger of Hadar, so it gives you a really powerful reason to play an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. Clockwork Soul Sorcerers have the ability to negate advantage or disadvantage as a reaction, which is really fun as well, and can cause you to have enemies lose their advantage on attacks really frequently and everything. Usually your character shouldn't be acting with disadvantage most of the time, so you won't usually use this to remove disadvantage, but removing advantage from an enemy is very powerful. I also always love any ability that you can use on an enemy's turn to affect the outcome of combat, because it makes you feel like you're doing something fun and clever, so this is a fun ability as well. Lunar sorcery characters will switch back and forth between two different modes. They're either they can be in full, or 3 different modes, excuse me. They can be full, new, or crescent moon, and that gives them different spell availability and different abilities, and deciding what mode you're in is actually a really interesting option for sorcerers, so there's a lot of play for that. And then the Divine Sorcerer can have some healing and a little bit of extra cleric oomph as a sorcerer, which, if you want to play a party without a cleric but still want some of the benefits of having a cleric, is really fun as well. So all of these fit a really interesting niche in terms of party building and are really fun to use. They all have really interesting options as you continue to level up. In particular, Aberrant Mind Sorcerers are a fan favorite, and they show up a lot in tabletop games in my experience, so it's really nice for people to be able to play those in Baldur's Gate 3. I really like this mod author's approach to these, of trying to keep things as vanilla as possible, but adjusting to work within the Baldur's Gate mechanics. But they've also added some additional features at level 14. Baldur's Gate moves a bit class abilities that are normally level 14 in tabletop to level 11, since the game only goes up to level 12. So for if you're playing with level 20, they've added some extra level 14 features in order to give you something as you level up, and I think that's a fun thing for a sorcerer to get as well. And as mentioned there, this is also compatible with a lot of mods, works with Mistress spells, works with level 20 level ups, so no matter how you've built your game, you should be able to use these extra sorcerer subclasses. And finally, Owlbear Cub Evolved. This mod lets you summon the Owlbear Cub as a fighter throughout the game, not just at the end of the game. And over the course of the 12 levels, its stats will slowly improve until they match the stats of the battle-ready Owlbear that you can get at the end of Baldur's Gate. This is, I think, both really cute and really fun. The fact that the Owlbear grows both in stats and in size, I think is really funny as well. And having the Owlbear alongside you is obviously very powerful, but gives you a lot of fun options as well. And for a character, especially if you're trying to roleplay a Beastmaster Ranger, all of the animals that you meet and befriend getting to help you out and contribute to your adventures, I think is just really great. The Owlbear Cub in particular gets Wildheart Barbarian abilities and continuously levels up as you level throughout the game, and also gets a combination of the Raven and Bear abilities, which of course just makes perfect sense since it is both a bird and a bear. Which makes it actually a very powerful combatant. Now, obviously, this is a very powerful tool and not really balanced within the game. The Owlbear Cub is a very strong fighter and ends up being an even stronger fighter as it continues to level up. So having access to it earlier in the game is, of course, very strong, but you don't get this because it's a balanced mod. You get it because you want the cute owlbear following you around and tearing your enemies to shreds, and this does exactly that. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at 10 more amazing mods that I've really enjoyed using, and I hope that you enjoy using them as well. As always, I hope that there's something here that you find useful no matter how you want to play the game. I think that something that is really great, both about the modding community and about Larian's approach to modding, is that they've enabled mods for all kinds of different playstyles, whether you want to have the game be more replayable, have the game be more difficult, change the style of your game, or access new stuff. There's mods for everything, so I've been really happy to try to showcase some of these. And I think it's amazing that there's mod support on consoles. I've said this many times, but console players often get left behind when it comes to the modding scene, which is such an important part of modern gaming, especially expansive RPGs like this one. The fact that Larian went out of their way to make it possible for console players to access those, I just think is incredible and really deserving of as much support as we can give. As always, of course, if you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Let me know what mods from this list you've enjoyed. Let me know what other mods you're enjoying. I'm always on the lookout for more fun mod suggestions. And of course, any interaction helps me out with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And also you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.